I hope you can all hear and see us. I'm Betsy Edwards, the Executive Director of the Virginia Press Association. And the session you're tuning in for is Trust in Local News, What Virginians Think. So this is an exciting presentation. It's the culmination of a lot of work done by the presenters and the organizations they work for, and the VPA staff here with the help of all of you. So we're excited to talk about it. But before I get started with this really great session, I've been given the honor of telling you all who has won the big $100 gift card that we are giving away for those who registered before Tuesday or Wednesday, I think, for this conference. And the winner of the $100 gift card is Rachel Nanny at the Chatham Star Tribune. So Rachel, we will be finding out what your mailing address is and sending you a $100 gift card in the next day or so. So congratulations. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. I wanted to remind attendees that you'll be muted during this session. And if you have questions, there's a Q&A at the bottom of the screen that we'd like you to use. Dina Meredith, our communications manager, is the technical genius behind this session. And at the end, she'll be reading out your questions to Andy and Josh, and they'll be giving you answers. So just put those in the Q&A at the bottom. And now I'd like to introduce our presenters. First, we have Andy Bates. Andy is, we're lucky to have Andy because Andy works at SIR, which is a well-known and well-regarded market research company here in Richmond. And Andy is also a former journalist and editor. He used to work at a newspaper or two up in upstate New York. And so he brings that background to the work he does now for SIR. His title at SIR is editorial manager. And Andy is helping us distill the meaning behind the data in VPA's statewide local news survey. For those of you who don't know, we worked with you or your our member papers, the papers you all are from, your publishers, to get this survey out to your readers in the late summer of 21. And this was compiled in the fall of 21, and we're using it now for a statewide PR and marketing survey about local news, which Josh will tell us about. So today, Andy is going to provide us with insights into the survey results. Josh Dare is one of the co-founders of the Hodges Partnership, which is a Richmond PR firm that is working with VPA to develop and implement a new local news campaign. Josh is a professional PR person. He's been in the business more than 40 years. He's worked for government clients, nonprofit clients, corporate clients. And Josh is going to talk about how we're taking the survey results that Andy explains and using them to inform and support this local news PR campaign that we're going to be launching in the next few weeks. So both parts of this are exciting. Both parts are going to your newspaper either helped gather the survey information, or you'll also be helping with get the word out to your readers about the value of local news. So I'm going to send it to Andy now. Andy?
All right, thanks so much, Betsy. Thank you for having me and for engaging SIR in this work. And thanks to you, Josh, for sharing the stage with me. I'm going to go ahead and pull my screen up. So hopefully we can all get started. As Betsy said, I am, once upon a time, I was a local journalist up in Northern New York. And so I did have a keen interest in this work right from the start. And one of the things that I've found reflected in these findings from my own life and experiences working for local papers is that people expect a lot from their local papers and their reporters. I used to joke with colleagues and friends and coworkers that, even when people would only stop me on the street to point out a typo that they had found, it meant that they were still picking up that paper and engaging with it, even if it was just to find the typos. And so they weren't shy about stopping me about that stuff. And then the longer I was there, they weren't shy about stopping and asking me if the Walmart rumors were true or who the next president of the school board was likely going to be. And lastly, I will say that a lot of the work, I know that a lot of the work that you guys do day in and day out can feel thankless at times. So I'll encourage you to take a look at these findings, to use these findings as a chance to see what you're doing really well, see just how high your readers' expectations are, and then start to pinpoint where you can use your strengths as local institutions to engage your readers even more. So a little bit of housekeeping. Betsy had touched on this, just to give you an idea of how we developed the survey and launched it and analyzed it. We worked with the VPA team to develop a 12-minute survey, some of which was distributed through your member lists. And that's where this N5000 is. So we engaged about 5,000 of your readers specifically, but we also obtained responses from almost 1,500 Virginians who we recruited through our online panel partners. And these individuals were screened to be at least 18, to live in Virginia, and to read the news regularly, which we defined as at least weekly. And we referred to that group as the general public. And so as we go through some of these slides and data points, you'll find that a lot of our analysis is comparing where the general public is versus where your specific readers are. And we also performed a lot of analysis that, due to time constraints, we won't be able to get too deep into, but I'll encourage you later on to engage with some of the research findings in more detail. You can start to look at the differences between geography, whether your VPA readers were urban, suburban, and rural, and the type of newspaper that they subscribed to. So you can get a sense of where suburban dailies versus suburban weeklies fall, and so on and so forth. So to jump right in, we wanted to start just by getting a handle on readers, who they are today, where local news fits into their consciousness. And so, some of the questions that we really wanted to answer were: when do they turn to you? What are they looking for when they turn to you? How useful do they find their various news sources, and particularly what they find in your papers? And then using that to kind of figure out, okay, when are you the top choice? When are you really the preferred choice for readers? And so starting with frequency, we noticed that even the general public, almost 2/3 are picking up their paper at least once a week. And almost 3/4 read their local paper once a month. Now, it's not quite as high as they engage with TV and radio or social media, but they are turning to you with relatively the same amount of frequency as they turn to their magazines. But local newspapers are a pretty solid number 3 in terms of choice for frequency. When we look at your VPA readers specifically, it is a lot higher. Obviously, they subscribe to you, they pick up your paper. And so you're number 2 with your VPA readers, just right behind TV and radio news sites. One point of demarcation here to call your attention to is the where social media sits for each group. So if we flip back here, we notice that social media is first with your general public readers. They engage with that most often. For your VPA readers, it is significantly lower. And there are a few reasons for this, which is part of which is just demographics. The profile of the readers who took this survey, that isn't to say that it's your definite profile of your readerships, but the people who took the survey were predominantly retired baby boomers. And so in terms of preference, that definitely factors in here, and it'll be something to keep in your back of your mind also as we go through some of these other findings, just where these folks are in life, and some of the preferences that they have. So we wanted to dig a little bit more than just how often do they pick up your paper. Obviously, we wanted to find how useful they find your paper and how useful they find other outlets that they engage with. And here you can see that for both the general public, you're number 2 in terms of usefulness. VPA readers find you to be their most useful source. So when they pick up your paper, they're finding things to engage with, and they're engaging with that on a useful level, something that they personally can take away from it and be like, yeah, that was worth my time, right? The national paper landscape here is interesting to examine as well. VPA readers, as you can see here, they find their national newspapers very much more useful than the general public does. Meanwhile, the general public finds a higher degree of usefulness in their social media sites and their podcasts than do your VPA readers. Again, some of that is demographically based. But what I find interesting about the national newspaper, very useful ratings here, is that it tends to suggest that your VPA readers are just a little bit more engaged with the news in general. They're a little more interested in the news than the general public. So what are they looking for specifically from your papers? When they pick up that paper, what are the things they're expecting to find? And so we asked them to rate these following topics by how much they value them. And when we see here, these numbers reflect what we call a top 2 box score. So this is only the people who rated it a 4 or a 5 on that value scale. So they value it highly or value it very much. And you'll find that through all of these slides, that is what we're dealing with, top 2 boxes. And so what we see here is that for both audiences, community events, that is the thing that really draws them in. They want to know about what's happening in their communities, how they can get involved in events, where things are happening. All of that stuff that they can really only find in local newspapers is what they're turning to you for. Some other top hits here, crime reports. I can speak from my own experience that the police blotter was always a popular item for people to turn to the paper to. It was also a popular source of early morning phone calls for people asking me, to keep their names out of the paper. But so again, a couple of other call outs here. The general public, as you can see, they have some higher value ratings than VPA readers for the topics. And that could just be due to familiarity. Again, we weren't able to ask some of these follow-up questions, so this is just conjecture. But if I'm retired, I'm not going to be very interested in job postings necessarily, things like that. One thing that was interesting though is that the VPA readers did rate editorials and editorial positions a bit highly, more highly than the general public. So they're looking for some of that local insight to color some of the other information that they're reading about locally. So when are you their first choice? Probably no surprises here. When it comes to the national topics, national news, politics, sports, they're going to TV and radio, the general public is. Entertainment, social media. Well, when it comes to local news, local politics, sports, everything except for local weather, which they also get from the TV station or the radio, local newspapers are the top source. And it's not particularly close when you look at all the ratings for the other options for local. VPA readers, same thing holds true. Local papers are the source for the local topics. And then again, with the preferred source for national topics, you're looking at a fairly even split between what they seek out in national papers and what they seek out from TV and radio. So news and politics tends to be more leaning toward newspapers. When it comes to sports, weather, things of that nature, entertainment, TV and radio news sites. So what it all boils down to is that for pretty much all things local, you are the preferred choice. But we didn't want to just stop there. We want to think about why that is. And so I'll start with just some actual quotes from VPA readers who took this survey, and also some of these are from the general public as well. Why do they engage you? And we found that a lot of people started to point to accuracy and lack of bias. It has become an increasingly polarized national news landscape, as I'm sure you're all keenly aware of. And so when it comes to having confidence in the editorial process, they see that confidence in you. They know you're journalists. They know how the stories are put together, how the editions are put together. And even if they don't, they feel confident in the fact that it is accurate and that it is less biased, maybe just because it is local and because it's relevant to their lives. And so again, these are the things that they can't get anywhere else. And so they choose you because of that relevance. You're reporting on their neighbors, the topics they care about. No one else is going to care about these things the same way they do, except for their local papers. And so when you add that relevance, accuracy, and bias together, it really starts to boil down or bubble up to trust. And that trust can stem from that accuracy and lack of bias. It's the history. Some papers have been there for 100 years or more. Others have just found their sweet spot in the community, and they just feel trustworthy. The journalists are trustworthy. They conduct themselves with honor and integrity. And so how much do they trust you? We wanted to find out. Well, significantly more than any other medium. VPA readers, 63% trust you completely or trust you close to completely. And even the general public, those numbers are at 50%. One thing to notice here too as well is that even though the general public engages with social media and podcasts for news, and that's important distinction here in terms of the question, how much do you trust each of the following news sources? So when it comes to the news they find on social media and podcasts, the trust isn't as highly. Same thing again here with the national papers and magazines, those more traditional forms of media that VPA readers are engaging with, they exhibit some higher levels of trust there as well. And I should point out that when you see this little dotted box here about statistically higher 95% confidence, that is a data-driven wonky way of saying that we are 95% sure that these differences could not have happened due to random chance, right? That it is indicative of a higher of a gap in preference. So those attributes of trust that we touched on with the verbatims, transparency, relevance, things like that. We wanted to dig into those a little bit deeper to figure out how that trust is built, how it is maintained. And to get at that, we asked them to say, how much do you agree or disagree with these descriptions of what a local newspaper is, what your local newspaper is? And so what we found is that your status as a local watchdog, your accuracy, and again, the relevance, to get the information that they care about, that's what rises to the top in terms of how they describe you and what they value in you. Other things to note here are that VPA readers are a little bit more likely to describe you as transparent and accurate watchdogs, and readers of small weekly, rural weekly papers are significantly more likely to agree that you are transparent, fair, and that you include people like them in their stories. But we know that local journalism isn't just about the topics, right? It's about the people who are doing the work, doing the reporting, doing the writing. And here we find that your readers are most likely to agree that the journalists understand the history of the community, they value that history, they're personally engaged, and that they help keep officials accountable. Again, small rural weekly papers have some significantly higher ratings for some of these, which shows that the small rural readers really value that place of local journalism in their community, perhaps a little bit more. Sorry, I'm trying to speed up. I know we're running closer to time. So we've got very good favorability rates, right? But when we look at how do we get some of these 60s and 50s closer to the 70, 80 mark, how do we close this gap between having 50% of your readers or the general public say, I trust you completely, or I agree that you're an accurate and important watchdog in my community? How do we start to bump those closer to 100? Well, the one thing that we really like to do at SIR through our research is to look at what's important to readers and how well you're delivering on those important attributes. And so when we start, we ask, what are the most important things local papers can do in the eyes of readers? Well, for both of these audiences, it's pretty much everything. They really place high importance on being a vital source for the citizenry, of keeping officials accountable, reflecting the diverse viewpoints of the community, and just being a part of that fabric of the community. And VPA readers, especially, as you can see, the expectations are very high for you to deliver on these things. So when it comes to actually delivering on those things and how well they feel you're performing, we see these numbers start to drop a little bit. You earn the highest marks for being that vital source. So they do see you as keeping the citizenry informed. But there's higher expectations and lower performance when it comes to being that watchdog, reflecting the viewpoints, and being a part of that fabric of the community. One thing to note here, though, is that while your VPA readers, they have higher expectations for you, they are rating you higher on your performance against these than the general public. They see you engaging with these things more frequently. They see you deliver on these attributes a little bit more often. And so they rate you a little more higher. In terms of what we do with that information, well, we just try to get at the areas of opportunity by measuring the distance, right? We divide how well you performed, again, by how highly they value that attribute, and then we come up with a gap score that helps highlight where are you most underperforming as a area of opportunity to improve. And so what we find here is that you're closest to meeting the mark on that local being a vital source for keeping citizens informed, especially with the general public and with VPA readers. That's where you're closest to that, to meeting expectations. Where you're performing lowest is in, and reflecting those communities, right? Reflecting the stories and viewpoints of the individuals who make up. So it's not just about keeping them informed and reporting facts, right? It's about better reflecting who your community is, who's making up your communities, and all of those individuals. How do you get them reflected in their community? And again, the other attributes here, keeping officials accountable, being a necessary part of the fabric of the local community. Those are all underperforming, but again, this is your lowest performing. I know I'm butting past my 15, so when we think about these opportunities, really they boil down to what Josh is going to be talking about, and that's how do we continue to position local papers as that vital source? How do we keep positioning them as anchor institutions that are just embedded in the communities, are a necessary fabric? And then how do we use your expertise and your voice and your platforms to reflect more stories, more individuals from the community, and to keep officials accountable? And so with that, I'm going to toss it over to Josh, who will talk a little bit more about what they're doing with these findings. And I'm very excited to learn about that. So Josh, take it away.
Thank you, Andy. I've got to figure out how to do my share screen here. So let's see if is that working? Okay, great. That is actually the biggest challenge for me as a 65-year-old trying to make my way through this without a millennial sitting by my side here. So thank you, Andy. It's always great to work on projects with SIR. You guys are so well regarded and so smart, and we appreciate really what we thought was unprecedented a look into the attitudes of local news in any state. So first, we'll talk to you a little bit about what our assignment was. 2 years ago, the VPA's board created a strategic plan consistent with the objectives of that plan. So we set out at Hodges here to create an ongoing communications plan that was designed to enhance attitudes about Virginia's newspapers. So digging deeper from a goal standpoint, our focus was on raising visibility, relevance of newspapers in people's lives. Given the quality of journalism that we see throughout the state, we wanted to celebrate that excellence. One of our goals also was to help forge deeper connections between newspapers and the community, as Andy talked about that category as well. And lastly, our hope was to work with Virginia Press Association members in helping guide them through some best practices on how to promote themselves. So the research, as you just said, Andy has spent a good bit of time on it, so I'm not going to go too deep into it, but our first step really to create a program we thought was to get a sense of what the current landscape was with respect to attitudes toward newspapers, and especially after a period in which newspapers and other media outlets were kind of getting beaten up by let's say public officials, including some at the highest levels, and so what kind of impact did that have on people's attitudes? So we looked at the findings the way Andy did it, and for us, 4 major themes emerged. And again, I'm not going to go too deep in these because Andy has touched on these. But first, there are a ton of media outlets out there, TV, radio, newspaper, online outlets. But through it all, readers look to local newspapers as their #1 source for local news. Almost 3 in 4 said that they read their local newspaper almost on a daily basis, is what they said. When it comes to usefulness of the media outlet, also local news topped that list. So encouraging finding there. Second, comparatively high level of trust among Virginia readers. 3 in 5 say that the papers are trustworthy, more so than how they find the trustworthiness of national newspapers. and electronic media outlets. Third, there's a sense that newspapers are engaged in the communities, not as much as we talked about, but there's a recognition as well that they're essential in the role of a democracy. And I thought a curious stat that emerged was when it comes to various attributes like fairness, accuracy, transparency, those types of things, the small rural newspapers are actually the ones that score the highest in those categories. And then the final theme, and the one we really have focused on a lot to inform our strategy, and that's that so-called performance gap that Andy talked about. The gap between what readers believe newspapers should be doing and how well they think you're doing. And you can see the numbers here. Almost 9 in 10 readers think it's important for newspapers to keep government officials accountable, but only 3 in 5 think they're actually doing a good job at that. Similar results when it comes to being a fabric of the community. And then just 1 in 3 believe that local newspapers carry a lot of influence in their communities. So where do we go from here? Oh, that's, I skipped that slide. There you go. Keep up with it now. So where do we go from here? I think generally the research was positive. You know, especially as I say, given on the other side of an era in which media was, you know, given a good bit of challenge by public officials with respect to their accuracy. There's some attitudes, like I said, that are concerning. Remember, this research is not research into what is necessarily factual or true. It's research into what perceptions are. And these are the perceptions, by and large, of your current readers. And so we asked ourselves a couple questions. How can we close this performance gap? How do we improve attitudes related to trust, related to accuracy, transparency, accountability, all the rest of those things that we talked about? How can we raise the visibility of newspapers, particularly for people who aren't subscribing and they're not really kind of part of their worlds? How do we deepen the connective tissue between newspapers and the communities that they serve? And how do we showcase the quality of our product, which, you know, is very high? And lastly, how do we do all this by leveraging the assets and the resources that we have available? So in devising answers to these questions, we focused on the unassailable, undeniable fact, and that is the quality of the journalism that's being practiced throughout Virginia. It's not as if we had this task of trying to change attitudes about an inferior product, and that's not the kind of client that we tend to want to work with. What we have on our side in creating this program is that we have a quality product. And so we thought the best way to get folks to recognize, appreciate the quality of that product, its accuracy, its transparency, its fairness, all of those attributes, is really to celebrate Virginia newspapers by showcasing them in a new way. And that new way is this. This is our answer to the kind of the baseline of our strategy. Here is a sneak peek at the Virginia Newsreader. So what is the Virginia Newsreader? Call it a website, call it a newsletter, call it a digest, call it aggregator. It's all those things, and it's really more than that. At its core, it is a regular compilation of some of the best stories appearing that week or around that week in newspapers across the Commonwealth. Twice a week, 2 times a week, Virginia Newsreader will provide links to news stories from 4 regions of Virginia: Tidewater, Northern Virginia, Central Virginia, and Southwest Virginia. Every Tuesday and Friday, the latest issue will get updated on the VNR homepage, and subscribers to the newsletter will get that email with that new edition in their inbox. At the same time, social platforms like Facebook will push out those news stories, as a lot of newspapers are doing today to really kind of promote a readership of particular stories. We'll do the same for VNR articles as well. These stories are curated by VPA staff along with Hodges staff. We've split the state into 4 regions, and we've split up those papers. We're all assigned to different ones. And we're excited, I have to tell you, by some of the preliminary reaction that we've received from VPA members, including, and very importantly, a willingness to take down paywalls for the particular specific articles that appear in the Virginia News Reader. We don't want to just be a headline service. It's important that when people actually see an article they're interested in, that they can click on it and get to that. So here's the registration page. Again, this is what early out we're going to be driving people to. You'll see along the tabs along the top there, various links to other information within the site about the Virginia News Reader. There's some copy related to that. You can always access a past issue by clicking on that tab there as well. There's a blog, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that because that's really important part of what Virginia News Reader is. There are facts and figures that VPA maintains related to the newspaper industry in Virginia. There's actually a map as well that VPA has created and maintains of membership, where the membership are plotted out. And you'll see there's a subscribe tab, and that's where we are right here. Okay, so this is where I need my technology to work for me. Here are a couple samples. Now we've begun creating issues, and here are a couple issues from April that we have created. And let me click on one and see if it comes up. Does it still come up? Is it still working? Yes. Andy, give me a thumbs up because you're the only one I can see. Are you seeing the, no, you're not
No.
seeing it. Okay. Hold on a second. How about now?
Yes.
Ah. It's the one thing I was freaking out about. So anyway, let's scroll you through a little bit. So this is actually what would appear in a subscriber's email inbox twice a week. And you'll see these are articles from throughout the state. Again, every issue will have representation from each of the regions. Information article about what's happening at UVA's architecture school. I am the sucker for a great lead. I love the lead to this piece. After weeks of tugging, pulling, digging, and dumping, the 1,095-foot cargo ship was pried from the muddy clutches of the Chesapeake Bay Sunday morning. I just love that kind of stuff. And here's a profile piece on a guy who turns various things into lamps down in Wythe County. And these are the kinds of articles that, you know, some are featurey, some are more hard news. We're actually going to send out some guidance on the kind of articles that we're looking for. But here's kind of a connectivity to, you know, something happening in Virginia related to world news, which we thought was really interesting. So again, it's kind of romantic feature piece here, which I, you know, harkens back to old days. You know, these are the kinds of stories that we think really represent some really great reporting and storytelling that's going on. So let me now do my best to get back to the PowerPoint. Are you there? Okay, let me just get back to where I was now. Okay, so here are those sample issues. Okay, now I mentioned the I mentioned the blog. The blog is really an important, we thought it was really important to create some original content in which we're doing the actual content creation. And so the blog is where that will reside. We're going to brand the blog. I think the leading contender in the clubhouse right now is something called Between the Lines. And so the blog will be the place where original content resides. We're working with VPA staff, VPA leadership on blogs. articles related to journalism and newspapers throughout Virginia. You'll find in the blog, there'll be interviews with reporters and publishers and editors. There might be a focus on how a particular article or series of articles came about. What were some of the considerations? What were some of the challenges in reporting those particular story? Again, pulling the curtain back a little bit about how you work and the values that drive you and the ethics that go into that kind of reporting. We'll also be profiling. We'll also be profiling particular journalists. It's what we call faces of journalism. And if you know, get folks again who know reporters and know editors a little bit more, and they're not suspicious of people once they get to know them a little bit better. If you know of a subject person who would be a good for a profile for faces of journalism, we hope you'll share that with us. As this gets bigger and we get more into it, we might consider a podcast, a VNR, VPA podcast that really, again, pulls that curtain back and have a discussion about particular articles or newspapers or challenges of journalism that's happening around Virginia. In doing some research, I came across this quote from an editor of the Sacramento Bee, which I really think captures our intent in creating this original content. You know, we want readers to get to know you better. We want them to understand your connections to the community. We want them to understand and appreciate your values and your ethics that go into your work. Okay, so why VNR? Why do this? Again, let's delineate some of the rationale for that. We think it's an effective way to raise newspapers' visibility. It's a way for you to reach non-subscribers, giving them a taste of your product. We're showcasing the best of what you do. We believe that the video newsreader will create higher levels of community engagement, reader engagement, especially as we integrate the articles into the social platforms and can deliver them out to folks that way. Again, I keep saying we want to pull the curtain back because for me, it's so important for them to really kind of get to know you. They're so suspicious about, so many people are suspicious and that you have ulterior motives. And I've been working with journalists for 40 years, and I haven't found really those journalists that don't really take their profession very, very seriously, objectively, fairly. And so we also want to have regular reminders through posted articles, through our blogging about the important role that newspapers play. So how do we get the word out? You know, as awesome as the site will definitely be, we can't count on it growing organically. We suspect there'll be some organic growth, but we just can't count on that. So our goal is to drive readership and engagement. To do that, we need to get folks to subscribe and to drive visits to the website. And so our soft launch is scheduled for the end of this month. That's when the first newsletters will go out. That's our first batch of subscribers. And that's when the website will go live. And a few weeks later, we'll make it official. We'll send out a news release about the Virginia Newsreader, and we'll basically turn the on switch on the social media platforms. We'll blog about its availability and get those blogs out to the social platforms. And we've created some house ads that we will ask you to consider running. So here are some of the house ads that we hope that you'll consider running. We hope that there's enough intrigue in them that to get folks curious enough to either visit the URL at the bottom there, or QR codes are really making a comeback through the COVID era, or have folks just kind of click on the QR codes, and that will send them right to the subscriber link, and they can begin subscribing and getting the twice weekly newsletter. I know you're asking yourselves, Josh, how can we help Virginia Newsreader be successful? There are a number of things you can do to help us. First and foremost, of course, we hope you'll subscribe. And that you'll also send links out to your friends and family. Subscription to the Virginia Newsreader makes a great gift. And so we hope that you'll kind of help spread the word a little bit on its availability. We're asking you to please send us articles and photos that you think VNR readership would be interested in. We'll be sending guidelines out about the kinds of articles that we're interested in. We're also working through rights to photographs and the issues that are surround the use of photography. And we hope that you'll consider running those house ads regularly. Now, beyond VNR, I've got a couple minutes here still, I think. So a lot of work has gone into developing a Virginia news reader, and a great deal of credit goes to Betsy and her talented team. It's been a great collaborative effort in getting us to where we are. As we sustain the Virginia news reader, we also be turning our attention to some other tactics that address some of those performance gaps that Andy talked about. We're going to be developing webinars designed to help newspapers implement best practices when it comes to using digital tools for promoting their papers. We've talked to a lot of papers who are doing this really, really well within Virginia. Really seen tremendous growth in particularly online readership by using these kinds of tools. So we want to help other newspapers replicate that, and we'll put together some training modules for helping them figure out how to do that. We talked about community engagement. We'll develop a training template on how to sponsor community events, events that are designed to engage the local community and really demonstrate your leadership within your local community. And lastly, we're already working on some additional research related to the extent of newspaper coverage. There's been a lot of publicity about gaps in coverage of particular jurisdictions or geographies, and we're actually are already starting on some research that will provide some higher level of accuracy about what is actually going on in that space. So that's our program. We're excited about it. We're optimistic that it'll make a difference. We look forward to launch coming up very soon. And with that, Dina, I think we've left 8 minutes for questions.
We do. We do have one question, and while Andy and Josh are answering this one, if you have any other questions, please type them in the Q&A section down at the bottom of your screen. But our first question is, does local newspapers mean print, or does it include people who read newspapers online? Why did we just ask about TV radio news sites and not TV radio legacy platforms?
Great questions, Bruce. Thank you. I can answer some of that, and maybe it's just, I'm sure you guys are probably all a little interested in this, so I will go ahead and pull my screen up again real quick, and we can see we did ask about online and print. So here is, these are a couple slides that didn't make my presentation, but are going to be in the research proper that you receive after. So we asked them, do you pay for a subscription, print or online, to your local newspaper? So if you'll recall our methodology, there was no guarantee that the general public respondents we got were subscribers to Virginia newspapers, only that they read the news at least once a week. And again, the VPA member lists, just because somebody's on your email list doesn't mean that they still subscribe either. And so what we found here was that pretty much mirror images, right? 75% of the general public don't pay for a subscription, print or online. 77% of VPA readers do. It's when we asked for reasons as to why they subscribe or don't subscribe that we start to see some instances here that also point to the gaps and opportunities, right? One of them is local news. Hey, I don't need to pay for it. I can access it other ways, to Google, social media, TV, radio. For some, it was an interest thing, an expense thing. And for some, hey, the quality isn't what it used to be or isn't what I want it to be. And so I don't subscribe for that reason. And in terms of the reading the paper online, we also asked how people engage with their local newspapers, whether it's how the ease with which they find reading their local newspaper online. And again, here we see some quick statistics here. 40% of the VPA readers don't read on their phone or mobile device, whereas the general public obviously is a lot more comfortable. But still, 22% don't go to their local device for the for their local papers. In terms of the distinction between news and legacy programs, perhaps this is my ignorance of the process, but Betsy, Josh, you guys can help me out here. Was there ever any discussions in our survey construction about why we just wanted to stick with just news? I feel like it was just, we wanted to make sure that we were getting strictly news related items and not other feedback that might cloud some of the results.
I think that's my impression, Andy, and it goes back a while, and I'm not sure that, I don't really, to be honest, recall much of a conversation that made a distinction between those two.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not maybe the answer that we're looking for, but that's the best as I can recall.
Well, thank you for answering that question. We had another one. I guess I can chime in on this one. The question is, how can we get copies of the research and of this presentation? The VPA will be mailing out all member newspapers a copy of the research report in the next couple of weeks. So be looking for that in your mailbox. And as far as the presentation, we will share a link, a video link of this webinar after probably tomorrow or Monday, once it has rendered, and we'll send everybody who's registered a link. I'm sure we can also get slides from Josh and Andy with that material if you want those separately. That looks like that's all the questions that we have today. We're going to have to wrap up here shortly because we've got another session coming up. So thank you, Andy and Josh, for sharing this important information with everyone today. The VPA is excited about promoting the great work of Virginia newspapers through the Virginia News Reader. And now we have another gift card winner. We'd like to announce the name of another gift card winner. Let me turn my video on. I forgot to do that. So the winner of the $20 Amazon gift card for this session is David Holtzman, managing editor of the Central Virginian in Louisa. So we'll get details to you, David, about the card and how you can claim it. So thanks to everyone for joining us for this session. If you haven't already registered for our 1 p.m. session, Google Tools and More for your newsroom with Mike Riley, go to vpa.net and sign up through the conference page. Have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you.